Hey guys. So today we are going to be discussing Act 1 of Romeo and Juliet. Now, this video is going to cover the entirety of Act 1, but no need to be afraid. I have trimmed down some parts that we're not going to read, which is just going to be basically me giving you summary, and we're going to be reading together. Some of them I'm going to be reading to you in modern English, some of the scenes, and some of them I'm going to be reading to you in the Shakespearean English while we break it down, okay? But this packet is posted on Google Classroom. It should have everything you need to read Act 1, along with the different descriptions of different scenes with major characters we're introduced to, and then screenshots of the text are all in there. So you should be able to access that as we go along through this together. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is discuss our vocabulary from yesterday. We're just going to go through very quickly. I'm going to read to you the definitions I need you to have for those words. Again, if you have any questions about these vocabulary words, please reach out to me. You are going to be quizzed on these, so you need to know these definitions. So your first word was adversary. It's one's opponent in a contest, conflict, or dispute. So just what you might consider the bad guy, the person that's opposite of you that is fighting with you, your adversary. Some of you might consider like your teacher is me, your adversary, because you hate doing schoolwork. In Romeo and Juliet, we're going to see that Tybalt is going to be considered the adversary of a lot of characters, particularly Romeo in this play. Next one is augmenting. Make something greater by adding to it, increase. If you augment something, it makes it larger. You can augment an argument by making it worse, by saying something else, by making that person more angry. Okay. Next word is beseech. Ask someone urgently and fervently to do something, which means that you're basically begging. That's what beseech means. So if you're beseeching someone, like, I beseech you, please, please, please give me an A in this class, that you are basically begging for it. Next one is a grievance, a real or imagined wrong or other cause for complaint or protest, especially unfair treatment. So if you're airing a grievance, it means that there's something wrong and you are not agreeing with it, you don't like it, and that you feel the need to let someone know because it is a grievance for you. Next one's the heretic, as a person holding an opinion at odds with what is generally accepted. So if someone's considered a heretic, then they are often considered like an outsider. They don't have the same beliefs as everyone else. That's why we had the Salem witch trials. They were considered heretics because they were holding this other opinion compared to what major society was holding. Next one is merit, the quality of being particularly good or worthy at something, especially so as to deserve praise or reward. So as if you have merit. Pernicious, having a harmful effect, especially in a gradual or subtle way, so it's subtly being harmful. Quarrel, a heated argument or disagreement. We're going to see that with the first act in Romeo and Juliet, the first scene of Act 1. It's basically just a fight. It's a quarrel. Solemnity, the state or quality of being serious and dignified. We're going to see that with quite a few characters in this play, characters that consider themselves to be dignified. And then transgression, an act that goes against a law, rule, or code of conduct and offense. So it means if you do something bad, you're considering that a transgression, or someone considers that one of your transgressions because you are going against a law or rule, which we are also going to see a lot in Romeo and Juliet. Okay. Like I said, if you have any questions about those vocabulary terms, there's not a lot of them, then please make sure you ask me because that will be on your quiz for Acts 1 and 2 of Romeo and Juliet, along with the vocabulary from the Elements of Drama and Shakespeare Introduction. So please make sure that you know those vocabulary terms. Okay, so you need your text in front of you, something to write with, something to annotate with as we go along. We are going to jump straight into Romeo and Juliet, Act 1, Scene 1. Now, this is going to be a scene that we are not necessarily going to read, just because I can give you the synopsis of it very quickly, and you get the gist without us wasting time reading it. And again, because I had to trim some things out, I mentioned that to you guys because we only have a very short time, 12 days left to get through Romeo and Juliet. So I don't want to extend stuff too much unnecessarily. So like I mentioned, whenever we went over our introduction notes, Act 1 of Shakespeare's plays tends to be that exposition, that introduction to characters, setting, conflicts. And we're going to see the major conflict in this play, like we saw with the prologue yesterday, is the feud between the Capulets and the Montague family. Capulet is what Juliet belongs to, and Montague is what Romeo belongs to. So it's Romeo Montague and Juliet Capulet. And they are not supposed to fall in love, and we're going to see that happen throughout Act 1 of Romeo and Juliet. Remember, there are 5 acts, but we're in Act 1, it's just the exposition. Okay, let's go ahead and start reading. Act 1, Scene 1. We're skipping over the first part of this scene. The play opens with 2 servants from the Capulet family walking down the street. They hate the Montague family. There has been a feud for years, so they get in a fight with a few of the Montague servants. Basically, this fight is really weird. One of them bites their thumb at the other one, and that's a show of you are disrespecting them, and so they start fighting in the streets. Tybalt, an angry Capulet and a main bad guy in the story. I want you to remember that name, Tybalt. He's a cousin of Juliet. And Benvolio, who is a kind Montague and voice of reason in the story, join the fight. The Prince of Verona, Princess Galus, arrives and tells the Montagues and Capulets that if they continue fighting, he will kill them all. Lord and Lady Montague, who are Romeo's parents, talk to Benvolio and ask him to help them with their son, Romeo. Ooh, main character. Romeo is having major sad boy vibes and they don't know what is happening. Benvolio agrees to speak to Romeo, and that is where we pick up the story. So, all you need to know from this first part is that the Montagues and the Capulets are fighting. That's something we already knew going into this, but that's basically what this first scene just shows you, or the first part of this first scene. It shows you that the Montagues and Capulets are fighting. We get introduced to two other major characters, Benvolio and Tybalt. Tybalt is this crazy character. He's super easy to anger, and so he joins the fight. And then Benvolio joins the fight, not necessarily to fight, but to try to get them to stop fighting in the streets. And then they're interrupted by the prince, who says, "You're disrupting the peace yet again. It's all you guys ever do is just throw things and fight people." So he says, "If you do it again, if the Montagues and Capulets are found fighting again, I'm going to kill you all." And that's a pretty big threat. I wouldn't want to be killed by a prince. So we're going to see how that plays out. Now, there's a list on this document of major characters you're introduced to so far: Tybalt, Benvolio, Lord Montague, Lady Montague, just those parents of sad boy Romeo. So Romeo is very sad when the story picks up. His parents can see that he's sad. That's how sad he is. And they ask Benvolio, who is one of Romeo's friends, actually his cousin, to say, "Hey, go talk to Romeo, see what's going on. He won't talk to us. Maybe he's going to talk to you." Okay? Now, we are jumping straight into the parallel text. One side is Shakespearean English, the other side is modern English. We are starting out Act 1, Scene 1. The rest of Act 1, Scene 1, we're going to read in the Shakespearean English, our introduction to Romeo, just because I wanted you to see that introduction to him through the Shakespearean English. And then for the rest of it, we will do the modern English. Okay. So Benvolio is our first speaker. As this is a play and not exposition, it is harder for me to read aloud. I'm not going to tell you every time I'm switching the characters, which is why you really got to be following along with me. So I'm going to be switching back and forth between that dialogue of Romeo and Benvolio. And there's no like Benvolio said or Benvolio screamed after it. It's just their text. Okay. "Good morrow, cousin. Is the day so young? But news struck 9. Ay me, sad hours seem long. Was that my father that went hence so fast? It was. What sadness lengthens Romeo's hours? Not having, the which having makes them short. In love? Out," Benvolio says, "of love." So what's happening in this moment is Romeo and Benvolio are having this exchange, and Benvolio is trying to say, "What's going on?" And Romeo's just been really dramatic. Picture him like draped down, like, "Oh, was that my father? Oh, I'm out of love." So at this moment, we're going to see Romeo, he's kind of heartbroken. We're going to find out what happens in just a second with that. Romeo says, "Out of her favor, where I am in love," Benvolio replies, "Alas, that love, so gentle in his view, should be so tyrannous and rough in proof." Now, Romeo is going to have this little long speech. It's going to be your first example of a monologue in this text. So at this point, he is going to really make clear what is going on in his brain right now. "Alas, that love whose view is muffled still should without eyes see pathways to his will. Where shall we dine? Oh me! What fray was here? Yet tell me not, for I have heard it all. Here's much to do with hate, but more with love. Why then, O brawling love, O loving hate, O anything of nothing first created?" So what he is saying to Benvolio here is, what happened? What happened? Why is there like scuffle marks? Why is there weapons? And he says, "Oh, I don't care. It's all this hate, love, this whole dichotomy, this whole putting those two things together that makes everything blow up. I don't care anymore." So we're going to see he's super emotional here. That putting the word love and hate together is that example of the oxymoron. Remember, we talked about it's one of our words in the introduction. "Oh, anything of nothing first created. Oh, heavy lightness, serious vanity, mishappen chaos of well-seeming forms, father of lead, bright smoke, cold fire, sick health, still waking sleep, that is not what it is. This love feel I that feel no love in this. Dost thou not laugh?" So Romeo is kind of waxing sympathetic here on love, talking about all of the ways that love is letting him down here, and he uses all of these oxymorons here. Something you should know. The feather of lead, lead normally heavy, feathers light, bright smoke, cold fire, fire is not technically cold, sick health, two opposite things. He's putting them together. Okay, so now we've been introduced here to Romeo. Romeo is super dramatic. He's super sad boy right now, sad boy hours. And Benvolio is just like listening to him, being like, "Oh my gosh, this guy is a mess." But Benvolio is trying to be kind and trying to figure out what specifically is going on. Okay, now that we've been introduced to Romeo, we're going to switch over to the modern English side and read the rest of this part in the modern English so that we can just fly through it. Okay. "No, cousin, I'm crying," said Benvolio. Romeo says, "Good man, why are you crying?" Benvolio, "I'm crying because of how sad you are." Romeo, "Yes, this is what love does. My sadness sits heavy in my chest, and you want to add your own sadness to mine so there's even more? I have too much sadness already, and now you're going to make me sadder by feeling sorry for you. Here's what love is: a smoke made out of lovers' sighs. When the smoke clears, love is a fire burning in your lover's eyes. If you frustrate love, you get an ocean made out of lovers' tears. What else is love? It's a wise form of madness. It's a sweet lozenge that you choke on. Goodbye, cousin." So again, he's still talking about love. Benvolio has no idea what's going on. He's basically trying to get this information out of Romeo, and Romeo is like, "You make me sadder by being sad for me." And he then flees, tries to run away. Benvolio says, "Wait, I'll come with you. If you leave me like this, you're doing me wrong." Romeo says, "I'm not myself. I'm not here. This isn't Romeo. He's somewhere else." Benvolio says, "Tell me seriously. Who is the one you love?" Romeo says, "Seriously? You mean I should groan and tell you?" Benvolio says, "Groan? No. But tell me seriously who it is." Romeo, "You wouldn't tell a sick man he seriously has to make his will. It would just make him worse. Seriously, cousin, I love a woman." Benvolio says, "I guessed that already when I guessed you were in love." Romeo says, "Then you were right on target. The woman I love is beautiful." Benvolio says, "The beautiful target is the one that gets hit the fastest." Romeo says, "Well, you're not the target there. She refuses to be hit by Cupid's arrow." We know who Cupid is. Cupid's that guy who shoots them with the arrow, makes them fall in love. "She's as clever as Diana." Diana is the Greek name for Artemis. We know that she is the goddess of the hunt. She's sworn off men. "And shielded by the armor of chastity. She can't be touched by the weak and childish arrows of love. She won't listen to words of love, or let you look at her with loving eyes, or open her lap to receive gifts of gold. She's rich in beauty, but she's also poor, because when she dies, her beauty will be destroyed with her." So, Romeo is talking about the woman he has fallen in love with. We see that illusion there. That's one of the vocabulary words, illusion. Is that reference to some other text? Is that a reference to Greek mythology, Diana, Cupid? But he's talking about this woman he's in love with, and he says that she's rich because she's beautiful, but she will eventually be poor because she's going to die without ever letting someone love her. Because she has sworn off men. We're going to find that out about this character in a second. She has sworn off men. She doesn't want any men. Basically, kind of joining this convent, being a nun. So she's saying, "I don't want men. I don't want them at all." And Romeo's really sad about that because Romeo's in love with her. And why is Romeo in love with her? Because she's beautiful. That's what he's basing his love on. He doesn't actually know her. We're going to see that as a typical character trait of good old Romeo. Benvolio, "So she's been made a vow to be a virgin forever?" Romeo, "Yes, she has. And by keeping celibate, she wastes her beauty. If you starve yourself, you can never even ever have children, and so your beauty is so lost to future generations. She's too beautiful and too wise to deserve heaven's blessing by making me despair. She's sworn off love, and that promise has left me alive but dead, living only to talk about it now." So again, he's so dramatic at this point. He's super sad boy. So he's saying that it's because she has denied him love that he's basically like a zombie. He's walking. He's still alive, but he feels like he's dead because she has denied him this love. Benvolio says, "Take my advice and don't think about her." Romeo, "Teach me to forget to think." Benvolio says, "Do it by letting your eyes wander freely. Look at other beautiful girls." So here is Benvolio's advice to Romeo. Romeo says, "Teach me how not to think about her. Teach me to get over her." And Benvolio goes, "There's a bunch of ladies around here. Why don't you just look at them, fall in love with them? Because that's apparently something you do. And maybe you'll get over her if you do that." Romeo says, "That will only make me think about how beautiful she is. Beautiful women like to wear black masks over their faces. Those black masks only make us think about how beautiful they are underneath. A man who goes blind can't forget the precious eyesight he lost. Show me a really beautiful girl. Her beauty is like a note telling me where I can see someone even more beautiful. Goodbye. You can't teach me to forget." Benvolio says, "I'll show you how to forget, or else I'll die owing you that lesson." And they both exit the stage. So, at this point, we have been introduced to Romeo. He's super sad boy, super basically depressed at this point, because this character who they have yet to name, her name is Rosalind. She has denied him. She said, I will not love you. And now Romeo is super sad. So that's where he's picking up in this part of the story. And that sadness, that feeling bad for himself is actually what's going to lead to him meeting Juliet a few scenes from now. Okay, let's continue reading. Act 1, Scene 1. We're skipping over the next part of this scene. The play introduces Paris and Lord Capulet. Lord Capulet is talking to Paris about the possibility of allowing him to marry his daughter, Juliet. So Paris is this suitor that's coming to try to marry Juliet, trying to convince Lord Capulet, who is Juliet's father, to let him marry her. Something we have to consider with ages here in Romeo and Juliet. Juliet is 13 years old. Romeo is anywhere from 18 to 21, it's unsure, but Juliet is 13. So she is very, very young. Paris is also significantly older than her. So this is an arranged marriage that's trying to happen here. Marrying a woman very young is something that was very typical. So this is not like super weird. We can't like freak out over the fact that even Romeo is like 18, 21. It's something that's normal. Don't worry. It's just weird to us now, but it wasn't weird back then. Lord Capulet says that it's not always the best for girls to be married so young, Juliet is 13, because they often die in childbirth. Eventually, Lord Capulet agrees to let Paris marry Juliet. So Lord Capulet has basically signed Juliet away on like property to Paris. In the next part of the scene, a Capulet servant who can't read asks Romeo for help in reading the guest list to Capulet's party that night. So Lord Capulet basically says to the servant, go give these invitations out. And he's like, I can't read. And then Lord Capulet is like, say, go anyway. So this guy's walking around, like, looking at his list, not being able to read it all, and he stumbles into Romeo, asks him if he can read. Romeo says, sure. Romeo, he actually tried to be annoying for a little bit, but Romeo looks at the list, and then sees that there's going to be a party at the Capulet house, and then decides maybe that would be a good idea. Or Mercutio, his friend, also decides maybe that's a good idea, and that's where they're gonna go, and where they're gonna meet Juliet in just a minute. Romeo decides that it would be a good idea to go to this party, so he gets on the list. Benvolio, Romeo, and Mercutio decide to gate crash this Capulet party. Because remember, Montagues and Capulets don't get along, but it is pretty conveniently a masquerade party, so they're going to have some masks on. So the major characters we are introduced to here, Lord Capulet and Paris. So what you're about to read is Act 1, Scene 3, and the introduction to Juliet. Her mother, Lady Capulet, comes to tell her that she's going to be married to Paris. We're going to continue with our modern English for here. We'll jump back to the Shakespearean English at the end of this act. Okay, Juliet enters. What is it? Who's calling me? Nurse, your mother. Juliet says, Madam, I'm here. What do you want? Lady Capulet, who's Juliet's mother, comes in and says, I'll tell you what's the matter, nurse. Leave us alone for a while. We must talk privately. Nurse, come back here. I just remembered. You can listen to our secrets. You know how young my daughter is. The nurse says, Yes, I know her age down to the hour. Lady Capulet says, She's not even 14. The nurse says, I bet 14 of my own teeth. But I'm sorry to say I only have 4 teeth. She's not 14. How long is it? Lady Capulet says 2 weeks and a few odd days. So now the nurse is about to go on an extreme monologue. This is the nurse's character. She's super annoying, super weird. She's basically just like running around the stage. Days in the year. On the night of Lammas Eve, she'll be 14. She and Susan, God rest her and all Christian souls, were born on the same day. Well, Susan died and is with God. She was too good for me. But like I said, on the night of Lammas Eve, she will be 14. Yes, she will. Indeed, I remember it well. It's been 11 years since the earthquake. She stopped nursing from my breast on that very day. I'll never forget it. I had put a bitter wormwood on my breast as I was sitting in the sun under the wall of the dove house. You and your husband were in Mantua. Boy, do I have some good memory. But like I said, when she tasted the bitter wormwood, the pretty little babe got irritated and started to quarrel. Then, when the dove house shook in the earthquake, there was no need to tell me to get out of there. That was 11 years ago. So basically what the nurse is saying here is that she remembers specifically that Juliet is 13 years old. It is completely pointless conversation. That is just an introduction to our wonderful nurse's character here. Lady Capulet says, summertime in Verona. Oh, sorry, skip a little bit. Lady Capulet says, enough of this. Please be quiet. The nurse said, yes, madam. But I can't help laughing to think that the baby stopped crying and said yes. I swear, she had a bump on her forehead as big as the rooster. It was a painful bruise, and she was crying bitterly. Yes, said my husband. Did you fall on your face? You'll fall backward when you grow up, won't you, Jewel? And she stopped crying and said yes. Juliet said, now you stop, nurse, please. The nurse said, peace, I'm done talking. May God choose you to receive his grace. You were the prettiest baby I ever nursed. If I live to see you get married someday, all my wishes come true. Lady Capulet says, well, marriage is exactly what we have to discuss. Tell me, my daughter Juliet, what is your attitude about getting married? Juliet says, it is an honor that I do not dream of. So basically what Juliet says to her mom, asking her, what do you think about getting married? She goes, it is an honor. I'm not thinking about it at all. No, thank you. Not for me right now. I'm 13 years old. The nurse says, an honor? If I weren't your only nurse, I'd say that you had sucked wisdom from the breast that fed you. Lady Capulet said, well, start thinking about marriage now. Here in Verona, there are girls younger than you, girls from noble families who have already become mothers. By my count, I was already your mother at just about your age. Well then, I'll say this quickly. The valiant Paris wants you as his bride. So here comes the mom saying, okay, you should probably start thinking about marriage because there's a man out there that kind of wants to marry you, like, now. The nurse says, what a man, young lady. He's as great a man as any in the world. He's as perfect as if he were sculpted from wax. Lady Capulet says, summertime in Verona has no flower as fine as him. Nurse, no, he's a fine flower, truly a flower. Lady Capulet to Juliet says, what do you say? Can you love this gentleman? Tonight you'll see him at our feast. Study Paris's face and find pleasure in his beauty. Examine every line of his features and see how they work together to make him handsome. If you are confused, just look into his eyes. The man is single, and he lacks only a bride to make him perfect and complete. So basically, during this time, men were seen to be judged on if they had a bride or not, if they had a woman or not. So they do not consider him perfect or complete yet because he is not married. As is right, fish live in the sea, and it is wrong for a beauty like you to hide from a handsome man like him. Many people think he's handsome, and whoever becomes his bride will be as just as admired. You should share all that he possesses, and by having him, you would lose nothing. So basically, what she is saying here is that he is handsome and he's of good status. So if you married him, you wouldn't become any less rich than you are now. So this is a perfect arrangement for you. You should get married to this guy. Nurse, lose nothing. In fact, you'd get bigger. Men make women bigger by getting them pregnant. So the nurse comes in with a really inappropriate joke in this moment. Her mom is talking about money, and then the nurse goes, lose nothing. In fact, you'll actually get bigger because guess what? You won't be pregnant. So that is what the nurse's humor is kind of like during this entire play. She's completely unnecessary in some moments. In some moments she's necessary. In some moments she's unnecessary. Lady Capulet says to Juliet, give us a quick answer. Can you accept Paris's love? And Juliet says, I'll look into him and try to like him, at least if what I see is likable, but I won't let myself fall for him any more than your permission allows. So basically what Juliet says to her mom is she says, I will try. I will look at him tonight and I will see if I actually do like him and can marry him. Okay, it's the end of Act 1, Scene 3. Now we're moving into Act 1, Scene 4 through 5. This is the part where we're going to see Romeo and Juliet finally meet. We're going to be reading this in the Shakespearean English. Again, you can follow along in the modern English side. That is up to you. Okay, Act 1, Scene 4 through 5. The next part of the act sees Romeo, Benvolio, and Mercutio. We're introduced to Mercutio. Here, he actually has a lot of speeches and monologues during this part, but they're completely unnecessary, so we're skipping over them. But Mercutio is just one of Romeo's friends. Mercutio is super hot-headed. He's really quick to fight, so we're going to see that later on in Act 3. So Romeo, or Benvolio and Mercutio, are trying to convince Romeo to let loose at the party. They try to get him to forget about Rosalind and focus on finding a new girl that will actually love him back. However, Romeo remains in his sad boy hour mood. That is until he sees Juliet at the party. He does not know initially that she is a Capulet, the sworn enemies of his family, the Montagues. A love between them would be forbidden, but he is very attracted to her. Tybalt, the angry Capulet we saw at the start of the play, recognizes Romeo and wants to fight him at this party. However, Lord Capulet, who's Juliet's father, tells him to calm down and not to make a scene. He even says that Romeo isn't doing anything wrong, so they can let him be. And he knows Romeo's reputation as a pretty good guy, which we're going to see he's going to try to get with his daughter, so probably shouldn't like him that much. So then Romeo approaches Juliet at the party, super bold, sees her and was like, haha, I like her, and then strolls over to her to talk to her at this party. And we're going to see this scene play out right now with their first interaction. And it's kind of weird, it's kind of awkward, and don't love it. Okay, Romeo, taking Juliet's hand. If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle sin is this, my lips, two blushing pilgrims, ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss. So he takes her hand. Some scenes do this behind like a curtain. So he pulls the curtain, or her hand behind the curtain, so she doesn't actually see him, and he kisses her hand. So I'll actually post some of those clips so that you can look at those as well. So let's jump over to the modern English so you can see what he was saying here. Your hand is like a holy place that my hand is unworthy to visit. If you're offended by the touch of my hand, my two lips are standing here like blushing pilgrims, ready to make things better with a kiss. So basically, what he is saying, he's taken her hand, and he has said, if you are offended by the fact that I touched your hand without your permission, that I have taken your hand, let me make it better by kissing your hand. Really weird. He's trying to come across with this like sliding into your DMs, like, hey, what's up, girl? And it's really weird. It's really awkward, and that's why he's trying to do these pickup lines on Juliet here in their first interaction with each other. Juliet responds, "Good pilgrim, you do wrong your hand too much. Which mannerly devotion shows in this for saints that have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss." Jumping back over to the modern English, what she's saying here is you don't give your hand enough credit. By holding my hand, you show polite devotion. After all, pilgrims touch the hands of statues of saints. Holding one palm against another is like a kiss. So basically what she's saying is, I'm not wronged by the fact you're holding my hand. That's fine. You hold my hand. Just don't kiss my hand. Thanks. So basically she's dodging his pickup line. It falls flat. So Romeo's falling on his face right now as he is trying to woo Juliet. Romeo says, "Have not saints lips and holy palmers too?" Juliet says, "Aye, pilgrim, lips that they must use in prayer." Romeo says, "Oh then, dear saint, let lips that do what hands do, they pray, grant thou, lest faith turn to despair." Juliet says, "Saints do not move, though grant for prayer's sake." And Romeo says, "Then move not, while my prayer's effect I take." Kisses her. "Thus from my lips, by thine, my sin is purged." So they are comparing themselves to pilgrims here. These pilgrims are super noble. They hate everything that's bad in the world. So they're saying that they're super great pilgrims. What they should be doing with their hands is praying. And instead, what Romeo does after Juliet tries to shoo him off is kisses her, which is, again, really forward of Romeo in this scene. He's fallen very fast for her, very unusually. Okay, so basically what he is saying is that by kissing her, he has taken his sin and given it to her. So he no longer has any sin. And then Juliet says, "Then have my lips the sin they have took?" Romeo says, "Sin from thy lips? Oh, trespass, sweetly urged, give me my sin again." And he kisses her again. So basically what he is doing here is he is kissing her and says, "Here, you have my sin." And Juliet says, what am I supposed to do with your sin? And he goes, "Oh, but don't worry, I'll take my sin back." And he kisses her again, which is an excuse in order to make out with her a little more. Juliet says, "You kiss by the book." Nurse, this is when the nurse comes running in and says, "Madam, your mother craves a word with you." And Juliet moves away. So Romeo has now kissed Juliet twice, and Juliet's response to that is by telling him, "You kissed like you studied how." Again, basically like a little bit of an insult here. Like, you have like a perfect kiss. It's really weird. You might have practiced on your pillow or something weird like that. So again, she's kind of just putting her guard up because Romeo is very forward. She has no idea who this guy is. So she's keeping her guard up and her wall up. And then the nurse has just interrupted her. Okay, so now the nurse is standing with Romeo and Juliet has moved away. We're going to jump back over to the modern English and read the rest of this now, okay? Romeo says, "Who is her mother?" The nurse says, "Indeed, young man, her mother is the lady of the house. She is a good, wise, and virtuous lady. I nursed her daughter, whom you were just talking to. Let me tell you, the man who marries her will become very wealthy." And Romeo to himself, "Is she a Capulet? Oh, this is a heavy price to pay. My life is in the hands of my enemy." Benvolio comes to Romeo and says, "Come on, let's go. Right when things are the most fun is the best time to leave." And Romeo says, "Yes, but I'm afraid I'm in more trouble than ever." And Capulet says, "No, gentlemen, don't get ready to go now. We have a little dessert coming up." They whisper in his ear. "Is that really true? Well, then I thank you both. I thank you, honest gentlemen. Good night. Bring more torches over here. Come on, let's all get to bed." To his cousin. "Ah, my man, I swear it's getting late. I'm going to get some rest." Everyone except Juliet and the nurse begins to exit. And Juliet says, "Come over here, nurse. Who's that gentleman?" "He is the son and heir of old Tiberio." "Who's the one going out of the door right now?" Nurse says, "Well, that one, I think, is Jan Petruchio." Juliet says, "Who is the one following over there? The one who wouldn't dance?" The nurse says, "I don't know his name." Juliet says, "Go ask." The nurse leaves. "If he's married, I think I'll die rather than marry someone else." So Romeo up to this point has been our dramatic character. He's basically saying that he's in so much trouble now because he has fallen in love with Juliet after one interaction. So we're like, oh, that's kind of weird. And Juliet seemed to be the rational one. And now Juliet is saying that she would rather die than marry anyone else other than Romeo. Red flag, girl. So she is saying, I'm going to die if I don't get to marry this man. So she has sent the nurse to find out who he is. The nurse returning says, his name is Romeo. He's a Montague. He's the only son of your worst enemy. And Juliet to herself says, the only man I love is the son of the only man I hate. I saw him too early without knowing who he was, and I found out who he was too late. Love is a monster for making me fall in love with my worst enemy. The nurse says, "What's this? What's this?" Juliet says, "Just a rhyme I learned from somebody I danced with at a party." Somebody calls, "Juliet!" from off stage. The nurse says, right away, come on, let's go." The strangers are all gone. They exit. So now we've had this party scene, this introduction scene, as Romeo meets Juliet. It was kind of weird, it's kind of awkward, it's kind of forward, kind of like ridiculous, as he made out with her twice. But that is the end of Act 1 of Romeo and Juliet. Romeo has fallen in love with Juliet, and Juliet has fallen in love with Romeo. Yes, that's how quickly it happens. And Juliet has fallen in love with him too. However, their love is forbidden, and nobody could ever know they are in love. We will see how this continues to play in the rest of this story, how it plays out in the rest of this play. So, Romeo has fallen in love with Juliet. Juliet's in love with Romeo. The Montagues and Capulets hate each other. They are now aware that they are the descendants of those families. Romeo found out that she's a Capulet. Juliet found out he's a Montague. And they know that they cannot fall in love, but they already have. Okay, that's the end of today's video. That is Act 1 of Romeo and Juliet. We'll be picking up with Act 2 in the next few days. Okay, thanks, guys.